Welcome to the Afghanistan Project Podcast. I'm your host, Beth Bailey, and today I am so excited to welcome Mursal, a 16-year-old Afghan girl who helped to educate girls in her country after being forbidden from attending the 8th grade in 2021. With the help of some amazing Americans, Mursal was able to escape her country, and now she is in school in the U.S. And I was just telling her before we started recording that she's going to be something serious someday, and I'm going to tell everyone I know that, like, I knew her when she was 16. Also, I want listeners to know that Mursal is the voice behind Hope's Corner, which is hosted on Kate Kovarovic's Substack, so please make sure you are subscribed there, and then you can hear her incredible words or read her incredible words. I'll be linking to that in the show notes for anybody who wants to do that. But Mursal, thanks so much for joining me today. I can't wait to share your story with listeners.
Oh, hello and greetings for everyone out there. It's me, Mursal. It's so great to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to share my journey, what I have learned, and the challenges that I faced. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, it's going to be amazing. I want to start with you. How old were you at the time of, before summer 2021, before it became clear that the Taliban were going to roll through and take Kabul? What was your life like at that time?
Well, before 2021, before Taliban regime took over Afghanistan, I was in 8th grade, and I don't know exactly the age that I had, but I never thought about that. The only thing which I was assuming like sometimes my uncles were teasing me and telling me, "Oh, you're like Taliban are gonna come back and you're gonna not finish school." I was like, "It's not a good joke. I don't like that." But we still, I talk to them, they still tell me that. Do you remember we told you that? But it's not something like funny. When it like first happened, I was in 8th grade, and it was like a dream. Like we woke up in the morning and imagined that we went years back, 4 decades that we people did work hard. We tried to build the country. Everything was ruined like a magic in a day. We woke up, schools were closed, women's had to cover, women's couldn't go out, men lost stuff, like a lot of men lost their jobs. It wasn't like directly affecting women. So women were the most vulnerable, but men were also the group that affected them. Most of people lost their jobs. Everyone was terrified. So I am, but like I wasn't really thinking about it like to cry and to sit and see what should I do without school. What like I still remember the first moments that I heard it on the news that we are no longer a recognized government in a country. So all that come to my mind, it might sound really different, but I was like, okay, it's the time that your community need you the most. I was thinking, how am I gonna help? Because I know, I already know that I don't have a lot to give to my community. Like, I was only in 8th grade, and all I did was like, I had this little math and a little more English, but like, I started teaching when I was 11, so I was kind of more involved in it. But I heard from where I was working, I stopped working when I was 12. So I they sent me a text message telling me, we kindly ask you to not come to the center anymore. Like, these are all happening at the same time. It was terrifying. But what I did, it was a little hard to, like, I could convince my parents that I want to teach my students in our house. We didn't have like a really big house, it was a little one, but it was all I could do. We had this group chat with my students that I would share their assignments, their homework. That was the great time we had. I was teaching them after school, and I had 2 classes to teach before school, because the school back in our country, it's only 5 hours a day. But it's what had happened and how it has started. Like my journey, it's how I started. I know it's not a pleasant thing that happened not only to me but to over millions of women in Afghanistan. But I always observed that as a opportunity to show resilience, and to serve my community when it really needed me.
I've been really amazed with how many people did just what you're saying and turned their homes into schools. And I wonder how much courage did that take for you and for your parents, because that was not allowed what you were doing. So, what was that? How did you find the courage to do that? And how did your parents let you do it, knowing that it wasn't something that it was something that could get you into serious trouble?
Yeah, like it's really hard to do that while like the government is against you. So like it took me like a week, continuous week, just telling I'm gonna do that. So first they were really disagreeing, but I didn't eat dinner like for 2 nights. I was like, I'm not I'm not gonna eat dinner if you do not let me to teach my students in our house, which was crazy. They were like, girl, we're your parents and we decide what to do. So finally, either by crying, laughing, or urging, I could definitely convince them. I said with my dad, so my mom is really worried, and since like she knew what's gonna happen, like that's how my sister's history happened. But I could convince my parents that wasn't a really tough thing because my father always have my side, but but I knew that it's gonna risk me a lot, but I had no other choice. I couldn't just sit and watch Afghan women. That it's not about only about women. Women, I feel like women is the body of the society. Uneducated women is an uneducated society. That's why I think they don't let Afghan women to educate. The main reason is they're afraid of educated women. They know what an educated woman can do. That's like this, what, it's the exact line that I wrote on a paper and hang it in front of the wall so I could see it every single minute when I was like getting frustrated. When I was getting frustrated because I was standing for like 2 hours and teaching and teaching and teaching, telling these noun, pronouns, adjectives at the house, and it was making noise at the house. My mom was like, girls, can you please keep it quiet? But I've always been a really loud teacher. So I wrote this line on a paper that uneducated women is an educated society, country, and a generation. So I was like, whenever I got tired, I looked at the line and I was like, okay, come on. You're gonna the one who's gonna give this education. So when I just first started, like there were like just some of my students could come to the house because their parents were worried too, but I could definitely say their parents trusted me a lot, although like sometimes when I was in a class before Taliban took over, they were coming and telling me, my little daughter loves you a lot, she wants you to teach her the next class too. So they kind of let them, but by passing of the time, my students, like most of them got aware that I started teaching in our house, and they were like getting over 20. We didn't have that big house to teach everyone, so I needed to figure out, like I cannot tell them that no, I'm not gonna teach you because I do not have room in my house. That wouldn't be something that I would have done. So I was like, I need to figure out a way. So that's how I took my next step. But I had a lot of students and teaching in our house. Although sometimes my mom would like, you're gonna clean the room, there's a lot of papers and a lot of eraser and this stuff. I was like, okay, mom, I'm gonna do that. You shouldn't be worried about that.
So, what was the next step then? Where did you go next as your classes got bigger? And was that, what time was that? Like, put me in a place, a year, a month, that kind of thing.
Well, a year is gonna be a lot. So, as I mentioned before, I started teaching when I was 11 and I started getting a job when I was 12. So, like, I had this really I know a lot of people in my community. Like when I was going out for shopping, like I at least greeted over 8 people. And my sister was like, I don't like going out with you. You stop every second greeting someone. I was like, girl, they are either my students, my colleagues, or someone who offered me a job or something like that. So it took me like, I just taught my students in our house for like 3 months, I think, because everyone, the girls had this really strong networking, and they were telling each other that teacher Mursal is teaching at a house, you can come, you can come. So it was around like just 3 months. So the next step, so for a while I told them that I'm kind of a little tired. I need a break like for a week, but I will never get tired of teaching and spreading education. It was just like an excuse to figure out what should I do next. So I talked to my father and I told him that they're getting so many and there is not room in our house. What he offered was so kind of him. He told me like, if you need our room, we're gonna move the bed to basement so you can sit there too. I was like, that I know, but it's not like a week or 2 week. Like all of my students that are knowing that I'm teaching at a house, not only my students, even new people, because the all schools and educational centers doors were closed, so it was the only resource like they could learn and educate. So I'm a new pupil, so that's what my dad offered. But I said like, Dad, it's not something that's gonna work. So the other step that I think, it was like more like risky for me. I called the center that I used to teach before. I called them and I said, I need a class. I was working for them for like an hour. I'm sorry, for an year. I was working for them like for a year. I was like, they really respected me because all the female students, they love to be taught by me. And like most of the times other teachers, I mean male teachers classes, they will either have 12 students or at least 15. My classes were like 23, 24. So like many places were offering me to come and teach with us. So I asked them, like I said, for all that I have done for you, for right now, all I want is to just give me a class which is big and contains like over 30 people. So they said, he said, I cannot take that risk. I can give you the class, but anything that's happened, you're the one who's accountable for that. So he gave me the class and he said, the class is gonna start at 6 a.m. till 7:30 early morning, and you should enter the class from the back door so no one can see you. Tell your students that they shouldn't come all at the same time. They should go individually, like when they're entering, they should be like minutes passing, so no one will doubt that what's going on here. So I could get one class. It's what happened next. We were teaching like it's really totally feel different when you're teaching in a class and you're teaching in a house. Like in a house we didn't have these a lot of chairs, so they were sitting on the floor, but in a class I was like, I got that joy again. I was like, every single day before starting teaching, I was teaching them something else, something more important. Although like most of them were older than me. I was like 15 years old. No, like by 2021 I was even younger. So they were older than me, but I was always telling them that it's not the time that you should just sit and cry in the house. I said like, don't be a victim of silence. We have had a lot of people who were victim of silence, and because of just keeping their voice inside, they died. What I loved, I didn't I didn't only teach them English. I was teaching them a language more important than English, and I was telling them that do not think that English is an international language, and do not think that it's the most necessary language you need to know. So they're like, teacher, what's that language? Teaches that. I was like, of course I'm gonna teach you. I said, there's a language, another language in a word that deafs can hear and blinds can see, and that's kindness. And that's the language that you should learn. Not only before English, but before even your native language, you should learn that. And how the course was working, how they gave me the class, so they wouldn't give me the class for free. they told us like you need to pay, and I didn't have the ability to pay by myself. But like as an educational centers, my students were paying a little money for the center, but the center told me like it's not gonna work. The amount of money that your students are paying is not a lot of money, so we cannot pay you because there's taxes, they were renting the place that were classes, like the center. What I offered, I said, I don't want to be paid. So all you get from my students is gonna be your thing. You're gonna pay the rent and anything else, but I don't want to be paid for that. But by passing the time, when my students got a lot, I was teaching like 3 or 4 classes, some around evening when there was not people, some online. So they could, after like a while, they could make some money from me, but I never asked for that. They were like, okay, this is the amount of money that your student paid. We're gonna give this to the rent, this to the taxes, and the rest is yours. But when I just started, it wasn't the thing, and it wasn't not my intention to make money. All I wanted was like to see them. What I really loved about my teaching was I was teaching them regularly, like for a month and a half, everything was as joyful as possible. And you may don't believe, my goodness, I have students who were housewives, like who were married and had children. What they loved me a lot. Like I had other students around my age or teenage, or like on the 80s or on their 20s or 18 years old. But I had these like I don't know, 7 or 8 married women, and I was like, ladies, you're not learning from me. I'm learning from you. Despite the chores, controlling their kids, husband, household, and these stuff, they were coming and learning English. I was like, girls, your motivation motivate me. I was like, if I would have been like in my 40s and I would have like 4 children with this current situation, I would have never come to a class and learned English. But they were pretty good at it. I want to share one of my favorite memories. I taught them simple future tense, how to use this will, shall, what's the difference. And I was like, okay girls, tell me your next year plans by using future tense. So there was like their little students who were like around their 10 or 11 years old. So one said, teacher, I'm gonna get that Barbie toy. The other said, I'm gonna invite my friends for my birthday. So there was different lovely plans. What one of my students said, so she was married, and she said, teacher, I'm gonna change the curtains of my guest room. I was like, oh, that's a good plan. The other said, teacher, I want to get a new baby. I was like, wow, that's a good plan. like there were a really variety of ideas in my class, which made my class really interesting for me. Like even before going there, like I woke up around 3:30. I was doing my stuff. I was getting ready for the class. I was doing my fitness at the house, so we didn't have to go out of the house. And I was telling them, I shared like everything that I had with them. Not only my English, I was sharing everything. And like when I was in Pakistan, I received a message from my student who had the plan to get a baby, and she got twins. I was like, wow.
That's so incredible. I mean, it's community, right? Which I feel like that's something the Taliban tried to strip away from women too. I mean, they've definitely done it now. Women can't talk to each other in public because it's like you said, they know that women are the core and the backbone and the heart of society, and they're afraid. They are very, I think, afraid of Afghan women, because I've said this on the podcast before. I think when Westerners think of Afghan women, they think of the photos from like the first Taliban regime, you know, a flock of women coated in blue burqas. And that's how they perceive Afghan women. And that's not, Afghan women are fiery. They are intelligent. They want to learn more than almost anyone I've ever met in my life. You know, that there's such passion in Afghan women. And it's like you got to see that at all the different levels of what I love that. That's such a neat thing. You're all learning from each other and being there for each other when the Taliban's trying to take that from you. And I can think of a lot of women who've contacted me over the last 3.5 years who could have really benefited from being in that room with you guys because they didn't have that and they were isolated from that community. They're, like you said, kindness. That really hit me hard. That's what I teach my kids more than anything in the world. I tell them, like, you can be anything you want, but being kind is the most important, and being there for somebody, you know, at a hard time, which is exactly what you guys are doing. I love that. I think it's just an incredible thing to do. And tell me though, I understand that the Taliban did catch on to what you were doing. So can you tell me about what that looked like and what then your life kind of became like after that moment?
Well, yeah, I told you like I could get a class to teach my students, and I got a class in the afternoon, like around evening when it started getting dark. It wasn't that late, so for me it was late. I was teaching them, and when I was done, my brother had to come and pick me up because that was dark outside. So we were doing these times so no one will notice that I'm teaching there. So I could teach them for a while. I don't remember exactly how many months, but it didn't last. They figure out. It was obvious someone would have told them or they have noticed like us going. So it was a normal day. I was just teaching. And it just happened it was so scary and horrifying. Suddenly they kicked the door really hardly. I was just standing there and I was teaching and I had my favorite marker, which was my red marker, and I did my students. So we were just teaching, living our lives. They kicked the door and entered, and there was this really big guns, and they were getting that at me. I was thinking that, okay, there was a word going on inside me, but what my facial expression was telling, that was totally different. So when they just got in, the man in the back, that was a Talib, he said, "Women studying, go wash your dishes." I didn't say anything. I was just looking. I remember my dad's words that told me, never get your head down. Get your head up. What you're doing is honorable. You're not doing something wrong. But I didn't look at them. I glanced at my students, like the little ones, they started crying, the ones who were like 10 or 9. The women who were like around 40s, they start covering their faces because it's what they want. And what they said, like, "Oh, before we came, you didn't wear that down-headed scarf when we entered, you remember that you're Muslim?" I didn't say anything. I was just standing there. I could see like most of my students start crying. Most of them start shaking. So I was the one who was teaching. They told me, "You're teaching a language which is not related to us." All I did, I looked at them. I looked at my students. I was like, "Girl, if you're gonna cry, so they're gonna lose all their hope, they're gonna lose their courage, you better not cry." I was like, I was the one who promised them that I'm gonna be responsible for what's going to happen. I was like, "Keep it up." I was like, I didn't say anything. All I said, I was like, all we're doing is just learning. And that's all. They said, "It's your first time. We just figure out never come back to this place again. If you come back, I will know with you." So they were directly pointing at me with those scary guns. So I didn't say anything. All we did, the head of the center came and talked to them, but they're not the people who listen to what you say. So we get out of the course, like the educational center. All of my students were crying. They didn't let me to get out of the course. They said, "We need to talk to you." And I was the only female teacher there. I was like, all of my students get out of the center, and I was the only woman staying in that center with all those men surrounding me. I didn't say anything. They told me, "Who are you?" I said, "I'm an Afghan girl." He said, "Do you have parents? Who's your," like, they start giving cursing and telling these bad words, that who's your dad? Who's your quart dad that lets her daughter to get out of the house and do these wrong things? So they start telling really bad words and cursing and these inappropriate words. But I didn't feel fear. What I was feeling was something different. I was like, okay, if they're gonna kill me, it's something that's gonna happen to everyone, so I'm not gonna afraid if they kill me. But what I was afraid, I was like, what if they hurt my students? What if they hurt the head of the center who's all innocent? I was feeling guilty, kinda, because the one who made this tragedy is me. I was feeling like this. I was like, all this is happening is because of you, because you started this. You might didn't start it, but there was like a mix of emotions going on inside me. I didn't tell anything, so they talked a lot at me. They tell me that this time we're talking to you. If you continue once again, we will encounter physically, and we will show you what's man's power. I didn't say anything. I just quietly get out of the center. They told me, get lost from here and never come back. Women, they said something really funny. I said something really funny. I said, like, if you don't want a female doctor, who's gonna treat? If you're not telling a woman to see a man, who's gonna control this? They said, the other one that told me to go and wash the dishes, he yelled back and said, women should give us babies. I get out of the center and I wrote a comment to Kate and asked her, like, I mentioned that. I was like, where I'm living, they consider women just as a reproduction machine. And that's all. So for 2 weeks, I don't remember, it was like a week and a half or 2 weeks, we didn't hear from them. I didn't even hear from my students because they were all scared. But I was thinking about, like, for the first days I was quite disappointed. When I got home, my dad says, he told me that, don't tell me that you didn't know that this is gonna happen. I said, yeah, I know that this was gonna happen, but I didn't expect it to just happen like in months. I wanted to at least teach them for a year. And I told my dad that I really did my best so no one could notice that I was teaching. But for 2 weeks or more, like, it was quite disappointing, and I didn't hear from my students. They were all scared. But I got a call from the center, from where I was teaching. He told me that we talked to them, and the ones who came to the course, we give bribe for them and they're not gonna come again. I was like, yeah, they're like, it was what happened. They give them bribe, they give them money to not come again. Because that wasn't coming from the real government. They were like these Taliban checking the streets and noticed that and just came and got what they want. And he said, he told me that if you fill my car like with petrol or the gas, I don't know, I'm not gonna come again. So I ensured myself that it wasn't the real government. I ensured that the government still don't know. There were these people, these Taliban in the street doing checking points on these stuff. So they entered again like the course and talk to them, and then they said we're not gonna come again. So again, I sent my students a text and I was like, I know what happened was horrifying, and you know that I'm not gonna give up. Anyone who feels and really wholeheartedly wants to be educated is always welcome to come. But the other day, all of them were there. I didn't expect it. I was like, okay, maybe most of them got scared and they're never gonna come back, but they were all there. After 2 weeks, I started teaching again. So we didn't go
Wow.
back
What
to
happened
Europe.
after that? Because they didn't stop, right? The Taliban didn't stop coming, did they?
So as we didn't stop, they didn't stop too. So everything was like getting a little normal. We were still like most of my students was still dealing with what happened previous time. This time it was the real government. Like it wasn't the Taliban that are doing checkpointings on the street, security checking. That was the real one. Coming from the what they call as Amr bil Ma'ruf. I don't know, like the head of the Taliban who's doing stuff, controlling the community. So they came, and this time I kind of felt like it's maybe again some of them doing checkpoint things and they noticed as we were here, they came. But this time when they entered, the first thing they took a picture of me and my students and say, we're gonna take that to the head of us and you're gonna respond. I wasn't afraid of anything, but when they took pictures, it was kind of horrifying. Like imagine I was just teaching, suddenly the door opens and they took my picture and my students like this and said, we're gonna show it to the head of us and you're the one who's gonna respond. This time they told me that I think they weren't aware of the ones who came previously. So they said, what are you doing here? Who gave you the permission to teach? This time, I told you, so they were the real government, so they started heading the head of the center. Like, they punched him a lot in the face, so he got this bloody face. And I was feeling guilty for that. I was like, I'm the reason that this is happening. So he started heading the head of the center that why did you let these ladies to teach? And they told me, just in case that it's the first time, and just in case that we don't want you, like told a lot of cursing about women, to shout on social media and tell the Taliban head us, just cause of that, I'm not gonna tell you anything. But if you repeat it one other time, he told me that I'm gonna break every single bone in your body. I was like, you're threatening me? Like this time there were not 3 people. Like they're police, they're not police actually. The cars, a lot of them, like there were over 12 Taliban and the head was standing right in front of me. A lot of guns, a lot of things. So they headed the head of the center right in front of my eyes and he got like this really bloody face and took him with themselves and told me, we're gonna talk to him. The next time, if you do that, I'm gonna come and break every single bone in your body and take you somewhere so no one can find you again. So they take the head with themselves and they told me to stay here till we come. So I was in a center, an educational center with my students, and they locked the door and said, you cannot go anywhere. They locked my class and say, we're gonna come back and talk to you. So it took like 40 minutes. We were locked in a class. All I did, I pulled out my phone and I texted my dad that I'm in a class and I'm locked. If anything happens, just know that Taliban have came to the center. That's all I did. I just texted my dad like, If anything is going to happen, just know I'm locked in a class and the Taliban is here and I cannot get out of the center. I sent the text and I put my phone down. We were locked in my class. I told my students, so I couldn't continue teaching. Like two of them were standing in the door, so we cannot get out of the center. So for 40 minutes, we were just inside the class locked. Then they came back and said, we talked to head of the center and he's not gonna let you anymore. Just get out of here before he threatened us, like, I'm gonna break your bones, shut your mouth, this stuff. So I got home again. This time it was really harder because I really know that this time it's really happening. Nothing is gonna work. So it was really scary, like how I felt is totally different. Like when I got to US, I still have that trauma. When I'm like in a room that are all men, gonna feel insecure. And that time, what I was feeling is like I was surrounded by men all everywhere, and I was with my students, and I just cannot express that how it was. I still remember that, but I don't know how to put that in words to be locked in a room with guns there. Maybe many people have seen these scenes in movies and action movies, but we truly experienced that. And it was not only me, it was my students. And when I think of those ladies that were protesting our in Taliban's presence for months, what they have suffered. I was just there for 40 minutes and then I could come back to house healthy, like I had my bones, I had everything. It's what they told me. I'm gonna break every single bone in your body. I'm still thinking about the women who were in Taliban's presence for months. The woman who got assassinated. The woman who got tortured. What they have suffered. When I even start thinking about it, I was like, girl, I literally lose my mind. I cannot keep that. I was like, I kind of occupy myself with reading a book or doing something else. So I really want to stop that. How horrifying is it? Like, you do not feel like what I was feeling. I didn't feel like I'm among humans. I was thinking they're not humans. Because I think there is a difference between being a woman or a man and being a human. For me, human has a different definition, and I do not call everyone a human. You can be a being, but not a human being. It's like what I felt. That was terrifying.
Yeah, from everything I've ever heard about the things that the Taliban do, I mean, they're not kidding that I've seen people tortured to death by just being beaten so severely, like you see the marks, like if somebody's covered in purple cylindrical marks, and that's what they do. They beat you until your internal organs, I think, give out because of the internal bleeding, and you die. And they know how to do that very well. They are masters of torture and things that I don't even want to talk about in the presence of a 16-year-old girl, but I know that you know those things too. It's they've done heinous things to people, and I understand your feelings in that regard. That
like one day when I was going to my class to teach, they were beating a girl. She was insanely screaming. All she did, all that happened for her was just like this down here got visible. Mm-hmm. Like, I wrote it in one of my columns that whenever I was walking, my biggest fear was like, may not the wind pull my headscarf and display my hairs. so I'm gonna die. All she did was like, she wore her headscarf like this. She had this mask. Her face was not visible like the one that I did.
Mm-hmm.
But this here was visible. They were hitting
Mm-hmm.
her, beating her. She was screaming. No one had the courage to go and tell them stop. Neither I. If I would have told them to stop, they would have killed me too.
Right.
They beat the girl as much as like she even lost the energy to talk or scream. She got like this sound. I just stood there looking. I was like, what is this? There were like other people looking. No one got and tell them to please stop it, because no one can. They will beat you.
Right.
Like
Or shoot
they were,
you, or
yeah, they were beating her, but I could feel every single punch that they were giving her. I could feel that pain. All I did, I was like, forgive me for not helping you. Forgive me for not being able to stop this. I was like, you're an Afghan girl, so I am. I was like, forgive me for not being able to do this. But I told, like, when she got like lost her conscience, I was like, I'm gonna take your revenge. I'm not gonna leave the pains that you suffered to be just there. That was the moment I was like, even if I'm gonna die, so death is the end of all of us. So I told, I'm gonna get your revenge. And it's not only her, but it was something that was happening in front of my eyes. I was like, I was just constantly whispering, forgive me, that I cannot help.
it's I way back before this podcast ever started, I interviewed Ramita Navai, who had done a really incredible and horrifying documentary about what was happening to Afghan women. I think it was released in like August of 2022, and she had gone into the country, and she could pass as Afghan. She's not Afghan, but she could, and she talked to me because we talked about some of the things that were in the documentary, but some of the things didn't make it to the documentary. Like she was going through a Taliban checkpoint, and the burqa that she was wearing, she had fallen asleep, and like her jeans were visible underneath her burqa. And one of the young Talibs at the checkpoint lost it on her, and and then they realized, oh, she's not from here, and she got kind of a pass, but just freaking out that she could see the bottom of her jeans. Or in another scene, she's trying to interview a senior level Talib. This is a world-class investigative journalist, and her hair had come out from the headscarf she was wearing, and he wouldn't talk to her until she put it away. So that's totally, I can completely imagine that. But you know what? And here's the thing that's insane. The Taliban say if a woman disobeys the law, that they're going to mete out the punishment against her to her male relatives. That doesn't happen. That's a bunch of nonsense. And they say that, oh, if you just disobey the hijab laws, we're going to go after your husband or your father. Well, no, you're going after the woman on the street. It's everything that they say is completely not to be believed. And what you're describing is exactly, I think it's so important to hear what is happening, because nobody who's in the country can say these things right now safely. And it's just really important, and it's horrifying too. It's just, you couldn't have done anything. If you had tried to do anything, you would be in the same position. And that's what the Taliban have done. And they've done it to the men in the country too. The men can't do anything because they will also be hurt. And so they've created this culture where you
But
better
no one
not
can stand
ever.
against them.
Yeah. It's a
Yeah,
huge fear.
like for the women, it's like even before Taliban, what keeps me really motivated, and I made a presentation, I'm gonna give a talk about her. It's not only this time. It's like I can say the tragedy did not start from 2021. It was long ago there. Farhonda, the girl who got cruelly killed, beaten up. Then they walked over a car over her and then burned her just because a man shouted that she has burned Quran while she was a religious student at university. She was studying religion studies. Like, you see, a small shouting. Back in our country, if you're a woman and a case happened, you're the one who's guilty. Doesn't matter. Like, if there is a case which men and women are involved, so you're the most vulnerable one. Or the other lady that I'm gonna ask for her rights. Her husband cut her nose, and the husband is still walking there. The man who shouted on Farkhunda that she has burned Quran, he's still walking there. Where's the justice? Or the lady that her father-in-law cut her tongue, or the lady that her husband's families get all of her nails out. So like, it's not just started now. There's that painful history. Like, most of the times, like when I was sharing it with people, they were like, oh girl, it was past, leave the past in the past. I was like, I leave the past in the past, my experiences, but what about them? I was like, if you do not consider that, you will feel that once they start happening to yourself. And how would you feel if you suffer and someone tell it's past, leave it in the past? It's like my only inspiration for the, not only for the politics, for advocacy, for women's rights, for human rights, for these stuff. Like, whenever I tell anyone that I love politics, they're like, oh, it's like a complex issue. I was like, yeah, what makes it complex is like not understanding. You do not feel, because it's somebody else's pain. And when you nurture that humanity in yourself, you would love doing that.
Yeah, well, and that's the kind of politicians that we need and that Afghanistan needs. So many people get into politics and they just think about themselves. And what you just described is the way that politics should be. I certainly hope that you're going to make it there someday, somehow. I can tell you that already. Well, okay, so we've talked about the really heavy stuff, the really sad stuff, but I want to talk about how you were able to escape the country and get to where you are now and what that path has looked like for you.
So, firstly, it was hard for me to decide to leave because I had these really lovely students there. And like, my teaching journey is a long one, so I didn't give up there. I was still continuing teaching right before the day I moved. Till the last day of mine, I was teaching. I was telling my students, I was like, forgive me for only having this English to teach you. I wish I know a lot of chemistry and a lot of physics and a lot of other stuff so I could teach you. But I was like, forgive me for only having this one. But they were like, we're grateful for what you're doing. So I taught them till the last day of the country that I moved. So my journey to the US, it was like really stressful. Like, I can definitely say I lost half of my hair because of the stress and anxiety during this process.
Oh my
that was
goodness.
So stressful. Like, so I can say the people who helped me to make this happen, I have written a comment about them called Angels of Salvation, and I called them the angels that saved my life. I really call them my angels. So she was like a light that brightened my life. So I kind of get in contact with her through my uncle and my aunt, who were these women rights activists. So they helped me to get in touch with her. Once I started getting in touch with her, she tried to figure out ways to help me. So the first one was UWC scholarship, United World Colleges. It's like really challenging process. Like, among 2,000 applications, only 12 students are going to be selected. And I learned about that scholarship. Like, 32 hours before the deadline. So that was this really long application that asks you from every single moment of your life. Like, you know, these questions in college applications or in school applications, like you need to answer them like really, really greatly with details. Like you cannot give them a yes no answer. So I woke up, my uncle called me around like 1 a.m. and asked me, you need to fill out this application. So that was crazy, and I didn't have my passport on that time. I was like, uncle, is it gonna work? He said, don't worry about passport. That's once you get awarded with scholarship, we're gonna think about passport too. So I applied for the UWC, and I spent like a month practicing my interview. Like that was like for the interview, I can say I memorized over 10 essays for answering that one. For answering each questions, because you need to represent yourself as someone who has both high academics and personal skills. So, but I was really excited for my interview. I got shortlisted among thousands of hundreds of applicants. I was shortlisted, and I was qualified for the interview. Like when I opened my emails, I was like, oh my! I screamed. I was like, Mom, I'm getting shortlisted for the scholarship. So, but you know what? We like back in our country, this electricity shortage and these stuff are really common. We didn't have electricity like for a few days, both on internet. We didn't have internet. So once I turned, like, electricity problem got solved and got electricity back, I learned that my interview date has been passed. They emailed me that your interview is today on 12 p.m., but I was offline and I didn't see that. So after 2 days, I saw the email. I cried a lot, and I emailed them like more than 3 times, but they never replied me. They didn't give me the chance for another interview. That was the only way. Like, I'm a high school student, and it's hard to find high school scholarship because most of them are for university, and I was only 15. I was crying. I cried a lot because of that. Not because of not leaving the country, but because of that 32 continuous attempts that I made to fill out the application, to record a video, talk about why am I interested for applying, to get all of those documents ready, to get all of those, like that was a really like complex application to fill out. So that was then that I missed my interview date and everything was done. I was really sad, but my angel again, she sent me flowers and chocolate and these stuff. That was so nice of her. I was crying. I was quite depressed because I lost like the opportunity because of not having electricity. So I opened the door. The man called me, "Are you Mursal?" I said yes. He told me, "These are the gifts from my friend." I was like, "Oh my goodness!" She said these really beautiful flowers. But yeah, it's happened. Like that was the first attempt that I made. But then that I think, like after a while, like I can see after 6 months or 5 months, I'm not sure. But after a few months, she texted me again and told me, "I have a friend who are helping Afghan students to get in high school in US." I was like, US? Oh my goodness. And then, so when she just texted me, I was like, okay, I didn't really take that seriously. She said, it's a possibility, we might could get you in. But they introduced me to the organization that support Afghan girls. And it was getting really serious. And my friend texted me to get your stuffs ready. And like buy a suitcase. I was like, what? So I wasn't quite happy and I wasn't quite sad. So like when I wrote this story about leaving my country and I sent it to my English teacher, she told me that she cried 3 hours because of that. And I was like, I didn't mean to make you cry. I was like, I wrote that and I sent it to her and I said to my English teacher in school, I asked her, like, I would love to have your comments about my writing. And she was like, I cried over it for like hours because that was like, it's not really easy to pack all of your life in 25-kilogram suitcase. You leave everything you love behind. So it's how it worked. Like one of my friends helped me, and also Kate helped me a lot during this journey. She always had my back. She always sent me love messages, supporting messages. I'm so all like thankful for having them all. But like this is how journey work. And like if I tell like if it's gonna be like a really long podcast about this process because it was so long, it took long time. Not that long, but my visa went in process. My goodness, that was a scary, not scary, that was really stressful and anxious month, 3 months. You know what, like every night when I was moving from that side, even at night, and I woke up, I was checking my phone if I have gotten an email from embassy telling that my visa is approved. So it took like 55 days till my visa got approved. Because when you're in process, it might take, your visa might got rejected. So the other student that had their interview, they got approval card, but I got process, administrative processing card because I believe like, because of the background that I had, these interactions with the government and these stuff, I think. It's what I think, I don't know the exact reason. And leaving my country, that's hard. Leaving my student, and right the day that I was leaving, like after that day, my student told me, teacher, can you please teach us the next book too? I really learned your teaching. She was only 11 years old, and I still have a video of her presentation. She was talking English like a native speaker. I was like, oh girl, like whenever people were coming, they were like, oh, your students are so intelligent. I was like, I'm so proud of you. But I was like, oh, like my students, like I don't know how they can get this really great English. So she was 11 years old, and she told me, can you please teach us? And next month, the next book, I was leaving. Like tonight, everything was packed. I didn't tell anyone when I was leaving because it was risky. Like my eyes, I wanted to cry. I looked at her. I was like, sure, I'm gonna teach you. She said, like, I have been taught by many teachers, but I didn't like their teaching. I was like, I understand. Then she said, will you promise to teach us next month? I was like, sure, I promise. I was leaving that day. When I got home, it was so hard saying goodbye to my mom and to my loved ones, leaving them, especially my sister, who faced a forced marriage, who kind of really needed me at that time. I had to leave. Like, it was hard. I had to decide between, like, my heart were whispering, what about your loved ones, your mom who's sick, your students who you're the only hope for them, your siblings? But my brain was telling me, what about the future? What about those women who have been the victim of men? What about that? So if you want to get that, you have to leave. But this was the biggest dilemma I have ever faced in my life. Like, it's hard to decide what to do. I know, like, everyone think when you get out of Afghanistan, like, you get a good life. Of course, I'm really grateful for the life that I have with what I have been gifted. But I still carry like I told people around me, that people think that I left Afghanistan, but I carry the entire pain that Afghan women are suffering now. I think about them every single night before that, but I feel like my hands are tied and I cannot do anything. And it's what that make me really sad, that I cannot do anything for them. I wish I could do more. I still have my students texting me, like they closed the center. Other female teachers, either their parents do not let them, or it's risky for them to teach. But I have been like, during this journey, I have been even headed and beat it, like in my shoulder. But when people ask me like, what happened, I was like, oh, when I was doing this fitness workout at house, I didn't know how to do it correctly, so I do some workouts wrongly and I hurt my shoulder. Because I don't want people to know, like, well, because they might think different, but perspectives are different, but how I got hurt. But I never get up to them, and I will never.
Well, this was going to be my last question, but I think it's important to ask it now. It's been told to me by some people who know you that you really want one day to be able to give a TED Talk about all of the things that, you have done. And so I'm just wondering, all of these things, you're talking about the weight of carrying all of those things inside of you. And I can kind of commiserate, like for the last 3.5 years, I've been carrying a lot of the weight of covering Afghanistan and all the stories that Afghans have sent to me. I've talked to hundreds and hundreds of Afghans, and it's a huge weight. But then sometimes you get the opportunity to do something with it that's really astounding. And so tell me about what you want to do with all of that and what your hopes are for the future.
Well, so currently, I've never I was always, when I face something, like, I don't feel like why this happened, sit and cry why this is happening for Afghan women. I replace, for me, words have power, and I always replace that why with how. How am I gonna handle this? How am I gonna help? Like, this is the mindset that I think everyone should have. You cannot stick to what's happening to you. We should look for solutions. So I believe, I asked people around me for help to help me to get a TED Talk. So, because that's like a global thing, so I can share what's going on. Because I feel that Afghan women are being forgotten every day. Like, there's a lot going on in the world, and they do not get the attention that they truly deserve. Like, you may don't believe, by this March, it's gonna be the 4th year that schools are closed. In a 4th year, a girl could graduate from college, get a lot of stuff, but it has been the 4th year. It's like, what I remembered, I was like, girl, it's gonna be the 4th year, and no one is paying attention. So the TED Talk that I really want is the reason to remember and to remind the world that what's going on in Afghan women, there's someone who needs your help, and every single help can make a change. And that's the reason I really want to talk about in TED Talk. And it's not only about my teaching journey, not only about Afghan women. I have had this life filled with challenges. Like, when I was 9 years old, my mom got cancer and these stuff. So personally, generally, academically, from every single aspect, my life has been full with challenges. And what I really wanted to do is to share what I have learned, how I covered, how I handled these all, as a 9 years old. I told my teachers, one of my teachers keep telling me, you got a really old soul, you don't look like you're 16. I was like, they're telling me you're mature and these stuff, but you get the maturity when life shows you the other side of it. I told them that my life didn't treat me with taking my candy away from me. It was treating me with taking my mom's away from me, my loved one, the freedom of my country. I was treating better, worse things, like my life. And it's how I get it. So I want TikTok to share, not all of them because it's long, but just share how I could handle that, or politics stuff. And I'm looking for public speaking opportunities where I live. And I have been invited to an event that I'm going to go and I'm going to talk, and I have already prepared my presentations about Afghan women. And what I love to do is to not only for women. I read a book last week telling we all should be feminists, and many people call me you're so feminist, but what I really want, like, women are part of society, but it's like how perspectives are different, but what I want is human rights and women rights, more importantly, because they are the one who pays off what's happening in society. Like, sometimes they pays off even they haven't done anything. It's all I want to do for my future career. Like, just be someone who others could rely on. Like, when I see most of the politicians, not most of them, but some of them, they forgot the promise that they give when they were not a politician. Once they get the power, they forgot what they have said. Because I believe power has this really dangerous side that can blind your eyes. And that's what I really don't want to happen to me anymore. Keep reminding myself, remember who you are and why you started.
I don't think you're going to have any trouble remembering that, honestly. You are such an empathic person and so kind-hearted and so lovely that I think you, like I said, I think all politicians should be like that, you know, and not forget. They do tend to forget. I think they have to work in a corrupted environment, and it just, you know, you end up giving up some of your soul to do that. I can't even begin to express how impressed I am with you and your courage. And, you know, I do think that what you're saying about adversity is so true. You know, I have been through some of it myself in the last few years, and it's just made me stronger. And the hard thing is that you don't want to be strong in that way. You know, nobody wants that, but when it comes to you, you have to figure out how to use it. And I can tell that you're going to use it for really incredible things. And I skipped over so much of your story in asking, though, about the TED Talk. So I want to give you the opportunity, Mursal, to talk about any part of your story that I didn't ask about, or tell listeners anything that you have on your heart that you want to share.
Well, the thing that I really want to share, the part of my story, so all I shared was about like only my teaching journey, I think. But the thing that I really want to tell is like my sister's first marriage. I really want to share that because it's a really big problem back in Afghanistan. My sister had been proposed by a 47 years old Talib who's already married with 6 or 7 children, and she was only 17. And it's not only happening for my sister. You might don't believe, since Taliban regime took over, half of my friends are married and they have a baby now. And they're all still baby. They're under 18. Like, one of my friends gave birth when she was 17. Or my sister, she hasn't given birth, but it's natural when you get married. Or for other kids. Or the other thing which made me really sad, and I conclude that in my presentation to the event that I have been invited. Back in rural areas, men must sell their daughters to get food to the house. And over dozens of 12 years old, 13 years old daughters had been sold to old men just because their father needs to take food to house. I'm not saying that it's the father's fault, but they do not have any other option. Like, they're saying that you got the women by you got your women's by proposing her with a diamond ring. We sell our daughters for getting food, which is really sad. These marriages happening really quick while it's not the time for, it's not their option. Like, what happened for my sister is another horrifying story. Coming to our house with guns, threatening my dad, if you don't give that, we're gonna kill you all. And still, it's not about the daughter, because when my sister and the other girls were going out, they covered their entire body So dressing cannot be a reason if they cannot control themselves. They think women are the reason of provoking men. It's how they observe us. But my sister covered herself. Other girls did. What I really want to change is this child marriages, which is really scary. Like they're still kids and they're taking care of other kids. And it might be funny. It happened to my mom too. When she was 16 years old, back there, the other regime of Taliban, years ago, dozens of years ago, it happened to my mom. So they were proposing her. So my grandfather had to marry her to someone else and married her to my dad. That's how it happened. And my mom gave birth when she was 17. So everything has this really long history happening again and again and again. It's repeating. If I wouldn't have made it to the US, I would have been married, which is scary when you don't want to be married. It's not only about getting married, it's about like taking responsibility of someone's life. And what's happening there, they're getting married to men over 40, which is already married to a woman with children, which is scary. And it's another aspect that's really concerning me. And I really want to change that if I could.
Absolutely. No, it's so problematic. And another thing that bothers me about that whole scenario is you talked earlier about how the Taliban, the Talib was saying that, women are just for babies, basically, right? But now they've canceled, and I've talked about this on the podcast so many times because it bothers me so much. Women can't go to midwifery classes anymore and nursing classes, which means that they've taken away the safety of having those babies, which basically means they don't care. And they've said it. Some Talib said to a Western reporter he said to a midwife who said to a Western reporter that this is what he told her, but he said, God is supposed to protect you. I'm sorry, God wasn't there when I was giving birth to my 2 children. A coterie of nurses and midwives and doctors were there. They're the ones who kept me safe. I was probably screaming God's name, when it was happening, because it wasn't very fun, but he was not the one who was protecting me. It was well-trained staff. So it's really scary.
Related, sorry to interrupt, but
no, go ahead.
My mom, when she gave birth, for her first child and second, she gave birth in a house with no doctors. So what's happening back there? We still don't have hospitals and clinics in most of our provinces and most of our districts. Women are giving birth. And most stuff, I did a research on that, and most of the child marriages, the mom lost her life. Because she's still either 15 or 16 and she does not have the strength to give birth. And there's not necessarily hospital or clinics, and she dies. But they do not care. For them, women is a toll, and they're going to get another 15 years old girl.
Right. And another child to put into their madrasa to train up in the way that they think, which if they had educated wives, they would never let that happen. That's what I've heard from so many Afghan women, is that educated women stop terrorism because they will not let that crap take place in their home.
They're afraid of what an educated woman can do.
Right, exactly. And I've this story keeps coming up on the podcast too, because there's an incredible woman. I call her Nazarene in all of my writings about her, but she reached out to me in December of 2021, and she was married at 13 to a horribly abusive man, and she tried to commit suicide numerous times to just escape that situation. She ended up having 3 children by the time she was 18, which I can't even imagine, being 18 and having 3 children. But she eventually was able to get a separation from her husband from the Afghan government, the former Afghan government. And at the time that the Taliban took control of the country, her husband was trying to find her because he wanted to marry their daughter off to a Talib, just like you're describing. And she said, absolutely not. And she fled the country to several different places, and now she's here in the US. But here's where it gets problematic. She crossed into the US right before the new year. And as we've seen now, Afghans are being deported if they don't have asylum, if they don't have legal permanent resident status or a visa like you have. And so she has none of those things. 2 of her sons are in ICE detention facilities right now. Her daughter is with her. They were briefly detained by ICE, but now they're waiting on their asylum hearing. And I just shudder to think what happens if they get sent back and she just has to go through it all again, trying to evade her ex-husband so that her daughter doesn't have the same situation that she did. And it's horrible. You're right. It's happening. It's all over again. It's trauma on trauma. And I don't know how to fix it. I certainly hope that you can do something that will help to fix it, because it's, I hope your sister is doing okay. I understand exactly why your family would make the choice that they did, marry her rather than letting her marry a Talib who is not going to take care of her.
Yeah, just as my last speech, that's why I mentioned that it happened like a nightmare. We slept we were dreaming, and we woke up, and that's why I say that we went back for years, this 4 decades of working hard. Those things that happened back at their previous government, Taliban's previous government, is repeating again. Forced marriages, child marriages, abuses, torturing women, torturing men, forcing the society. These are all repeating again. And no one knows how long this one is going to last.
Yep. And for anyone who thinks that this is just a description of Afghan culture, it's not. This is the culture that the Taliban and their ilk brought in. I mean, I've talked to Manija Bakhtari, still is technically an ambassador of the former Afghan government. She never gave up her post. So she continues to act as the ambassador of the former Afghan government. She's an incredible woman. I interviewed her for Fox a while back, and she sent me photos of her mother-in-law and her mother graduating from college, unveiled completely in the, I want to say 60s or 70s. That's Afghan culture, is what she told me. This new stuff is not Afghan culture. It's what's been imposed on Afghanistan.
Really lovely, colorful culture. Women used to be the signs of beauty and delegation in our culture. The poetry that we have, the literature history that we have, women have always been respected. And it's neither Islam. They are creating Islamic phobia, abusing religion, culture, everything.
Yeah, absolutely. It's nothing like that. If you go back to history, one of the books that I love to read with my kids it's called Brave with Beauty, and it's about Queen Gaharshad. And, just an incredible, strong Afghan woman who made things around her beautiful and venerated, made some beautiful mosques to celebrate her religion, but it wasn't a religion like the one that the Taliban have instilled. That is not, and no one, I think, in the Islamic world really thinks that what the Taliban are practicing is Islam either. That's the only country where girls can't go to school. It's not normal. No one should be treating it like it's normal. And you know what, Mursal, I feel you. I've been disgusted with the international community ever since the Taliban canceled girls' schools. They said that girls could go back to school, and then just said the day that they were supposed to open the schools, said, no, well, we're not going to do it. And no one did anything. We're all just silent, and it's time to stop being silent and to stop saying that this is okay. It's not okay. I'm glad that, if you were still inside of Afghanistan, you couldn't show your face on this podcast. You couldn't share your story like this on this podcast. And so I know that it's been a really difficult choice for you, but now you have the ability to make a change that you wouldn't be able to make if you were still there. So I have so much gratitude to the people who helped you get here, who are, as you say, angels. And so I'm just so grateful that you shared that. That was a really hard story to listen to in places, but you have such incredible strength, and you're going to do amazing things.
Thank you so much. Thank you for offering me this opportunity to talk and to share my story. And again, I'm expressing gratitude for all the people who helped me and were with me during this journey, and the people that I'm meeting and I'm gonna meet in the future. I'm so thankful for having them all.
Well, this has been fantastic. I want to have you back after, give it a couple years and you're going to be, like I said before, something just incredible and unbelievable. And I'm going to have you back if I still have a podcast then to talk about all the change, because it's coming.
I love to talk.
I think it would be very fun. We'll have to revisit. And I just want to thank all the listeners for sharing their time and for, you can't get better access to what's happening inside than from listening to someone like you, Mursal. So I hope everyone has really understood how important that news is and maybe takes it somewhere else and shares it so that we all are thinking about this and talking about this, even if it's not easy. For everyone who is watching, make sure you're subscribed to the page, that you've got notifications enabled, all of those good things. And for now, Tasha Kaur, and hope to see you again soon.
Listeners, de nada. Do you want me to tell it in all languages?
Go for it. Tell it in all the languages. This girl knows every language ever. Future head of the UN.
Persian saying "Khwahish mikonom, salamat bashing." I'm gonna go in Spanish that says "De nada, muchas gracias." In English it means "You're always welcome. Thank you so much for having me." And in Pashto it says "Deershe der khushal asma chitasaram logegida." These are the languages.
I wish I could remember. I'm just going to say vielen Dank. Just a little German here. We'll do a little bit of everything. Thanks, Mursal. It's been so fun.
Yeah, it was I had a really great time.